Hey, so good afternoon, Laurie, and thank you so much for participating in the first ever poster and a podcast by the Global Health SIG. And so, can you please tell us about your role in the whole project?
Yes, thank you. I'm excited to be here. I think this is a really neat format. My name's Laurie Farroni. I am faculty at the University of Texas Medical Branch in Galveston. I'm an associate professor in the Department of Physical Therapy, and then I have a role in our School of Health Professions as an assistant dean for community engagement and global outreach. So my connection to this specific clinic, we call it Grace Mobility Clinic, was one of my roles at the institution is sort of connecting student enthusiasms to community needs. And our institution had begun a partnership with a local church called Central Church, where they had a very big emphasis on meeting the needs of persons experiencing homelessness here on our little island of Galveston, Texas. Um, it started out with primary services being showers, meals, transportation support, mental health support, counseling, social work, and then nursing and medicine were initially added. And sort of what was happening at the same time is I had students coming to me that were not from Galveston, and they were observing. It's a very old city, historic city that's been lifted, elevated, if you will, to deal with our flooding from storms. And so, as a byproduct of that, it's very unfriendly to people ambulating with disabilities or utilizing wheelchairs. We have really high curbs. We have our sidewalks are not contiguous at all. So our students actually were observing that there were so many people with ill-fitting assistive devices that appeared to be experiencing homelessness. And they, in their minds, were like, well, can we do something on a corner and adjust assistive devices or give things out? And I was like, well, I don't think that's really what we want to do, but let me see what the needs are with some of our community partners and what some requests are coming in. And it was just a kind of a perfect timing, really, because I actually was in a community meeting with a bunch of local organizations, and this need for addressing persons experiencing homelessness that have some type of mobility difference was brought up. And I was like, well, I have these enthusiastic students and faculty that are interested in working with this population. So let's put our heads together. So that's sort of how we started.
Okay. And if I'm not mistaken, this project started, well, as an initial project, started last year, correct?
I mean, it started, I guess it's been 2 years now where we really started the conversations, but it's been a year of it really running as an integrated part of services at this community site.
Okay. So can you tell me about, like the initial challenges of having to figure out, like where you're going to be, how physical therapy and the services that we actually provide will fit into serving this population?
Right. So that was a really big learning curve for me, and I feel like for the student leadership at the time. What we did was the students with the real enthusiasm for this project, they decided, to sort of funnel their energies around this into a capstone project initially,
Mm.
and started meeting with community members. So some actual persons experiencing homelessness that are on the board with this local organization, as well as the other volunteer leadership there, and talking about how do they see various health professions supporting the population in a way that is not doesn't feel like a clinic, because many of the people coming in were admittedly, care avoidant. They had many
Yeah.
negative experiences, right, in regular health settings or the ER. And so they were with lots of chronic conditions and just avoiding care. And so the charge to us was, we want you to come in and support people that have different mobility issues, but we want you to do it in a way that makes it clear that you're guests in their space and that you're coming in and you are, meeting their needs and being respectful of their time, this place, their space, and that it doesn't feel like an outpatient clinic. And
Mhm.
so we are all over this building. We don't have an elevator. So people that can't climb stairs, we see downstairs in a side sanctuary or in the hall. Or we go outside, if they're outside and wanting to practice, getting up and down from curbs, etc. So in my mind, it's a very natural environment because it is the community space that these community members would be seeking routinely, whether or not we were there.
Okay, I just want to backtrack a little bit. Why it seems like there's a, significant population of people
Mhm.
experiencing homelessness in the area, and what are the factors, that seem to contribute to that?
Well, it's interesting. So a whole pile of podcasts could be done on some of that, but all I'll
For
say is
sure.
within our county, all of the shelter services are actually on Galveston Island. And once you're on Galveston Island, and if you don't have transportation, it's very hard to leave because you cannot walk across the bridge. And there's very limited bus services. So oftentimes people come to the southern part of the county to stay in the Salvation Army shelter because there isn't anything in the northern county. And then when they leave that space, there is really nowhere else for them to go, and it's hard for them to get off the island. So it's sort of this it's a structural artifact of the way things kind of have evolved down here. We don't have a huge number, but for the size of the island, we do have a number of we have the majority of the people in the county are on the island that are experiencing homelessness.
Are most of the, PH, right, population, I would just have to
Mhm,
refer to them as that.
mhm,
Um, I mean, are they multicultural,
mhm,
are they mostly, like what kind of like racial, I guess, like ethnic backgrounds do you see
mhm.
in the population?
It's pretty diverse here. I mean, I don't want to speak with any definitives because I don't have that data in front of me as far as percentages, but we have a pretty large Hispanic population here, as well as um, Black, and we have some. We have a large fisherman community here, which is a bigger Vietnamese population as well. So we have a pretty diverse population.
Okay.
Mhm.
And can you like note like an interesting probably like encounter in, with one of them that could possibly pertain to like cultural differences in like cultural health beliefs? And, like how
Mm,
did like say your student, how did one of the student or any of you actually handle that?
that's a really great question. Um, I mean, I think what the students learn so acutely in this setting is the critical need for connection and relationship building from the outset, or people assume that they don't need your service because there is that sort of distrust and skepticism. We had a gentleman who, so someone who had been incarcerated for several decades and was just recently, returned to the general population, and that culture in and of itself, is the reintegration there is very complex, especially where we are. And he was very care avoidant because he had had so many negative experiences prior to his incarceration, and then while he was um, serving his sentence, also a lot of poor poor connections. And he actually was someone who had had a very traumatic fracture probably 20 years ago, with some hardware placed that ultimately failed while he was incarcerated, to the extent that his foot was functionally detached from his tibia. And it was one of the most, it was so fascinating for us and the students to see, because he had basically developed his own external orthotic, and he rode a bike around town with what, if he'd come into a clinic, we would all assume would be completely, there was no way this person is getting around, right? And he just taught us an inordinate amount. Ultimately, we were able to get him pro bono consultation with orthopedics, orthotists, and we're able to get him. Ultimately, the decision that was deemed best was for him to get an amputation and to get a prosthetic limb, which he just recently had, and now he is independently ambulatory with no assistive device. But he conveyed to us his sort of shock that he would even be met with support for or this possibility. So, I think that that's another big part of the population that we encounter a lot are people that are experiencing homelessness now because they don't have resources when they leave the prison system, and
Mhm.
they don't maybe have family support. And so when they get connected with these services, there's just this initial like total disbelief that there's any way that we can help them. Um, so that's just one example I can think of.
Wow. So I feel like I myself actually practice in a community-based setting. And I think that that is one of the most fulfilling parts of my job, our job, I think, as a physical therapist, is that while we are presenting to them as clinicians, we're also human beings that
Hmm.
cares for them. And I think that's really where, like we get more of their attention, right? That's usually the first step towards getting that therapeutic alliance. And what is it that they say, right? It's not always about what you know as much as how you make people feel when you actually encounter them for the first time that really makes them connect to us. So, um, right now, though, how has, like from your initial setting, how has the program, I know it's now a mobility clinic, right?
Hmm.
But how has it evolved? Like, I'm actually very interested in hearing, like, was it more of the, I would say, the population that actually insisted or felt like, okay, we need you to be part of where we are? Or was it more of you guys, like the physical therapy program or the students who felt like, okay, we need to be part of like,
Hmm.
to be more part of this community?
Yeah. I mean, I think it is both. Um, but it was a need that was identified by the local orgs that were interfacing directly with the PH population. Initially, we really started out just doing assistive device fittings and modifications and fixing shoes and sort of this um, fixing bicycles too sometimes, or working with the bike shop people. But it has evolved a lot from there because what we have found, again, because we really flatten the hierarchies in the space, that, we don't wear clinic clothes, we don't wear our university name tags. We tell the students to come in t-shirts and jeans to wear what they would wear outside. And so what we have found is that even though we do have another pro bono clinic down the street that does more routine visits and follow-ups, that many of the people that spend time in the space, that's still too sort of a standard medical model for them, and they are just not comfortable there, or they don't have their life has too many complexities to keep a set appointment, to set up for the bus pickup, etc. And so we went from doing this sort of modifications to small screenings to now we do full PT evaluations. And
Mhm.
if the patients can only be seen in our walk-in model, then we find a way to run a plan of care with them there in that space. So, I mean, we like to have patients go to the outpatient center where we have, more equipment and it's a quieter space. I think that's our comfort zone, right? But we recognize that then we were not meeting the population need by, referring them to a clinic that wasn't compatible with their life and lifestyle. So we have now integrated all of these sort of unskilled things. We also do foot baths, shoe fittings, big shoe drives. It's a big initiative that all of our students participate in. But then we also provide physical therapy, direct physical therapy services inside the community space.
What is how do you think, have you observed something, like in the students who participated, like how they were when they started and how, like towards the end of the program probably, or their stint in,
Yeah.
like how, yeah, how have you seen, and in what ways have you actually seen them grow? In ways that
Yeah,
you feel like you think you haven't seen somebody not exposed to the same, a similar situation, similar context, as a student.
I just think, and I know I'm bringing my bias here because I love this work, of course, so just full disclosure there. And in fact, we are starting to explore this qualitatively through focus groups and actually, hopefully, we'll have additional information to present in the next year or so. But just more anecdotally and from the reflections that we've gathered, the students feel first of all, many of them are coming into working with this population where they've had a fear of
Mhm.
the PEH community and a bias, a discomfort, generalization about persons that have addiction, persons that have a history of incarceration. And they describe, this very humanizing experience of
Mhm.
making friends with people in the community. And so what is fascinating to me is we have many different community initiatives that are robust and lovely here. We're very lucky that way. But this is a clinic that when the students get involved into this space, they want to come every week. And a lot of the community members, the same people, even the ones they aren't seeing for PT, are in the space. So they're developing friendships, relationships, and connecting with people that they otherwise never would. And they describe, what it feels like to hear someone's lived experience and how it affects them and how they view, patients that they see subsequently in clinic. And we get a lot of reflections on their confidence with just conversation, history taking, because if they're giving a patient a foot bath, for example, that's like 20 minutes where you're just talking to someone and they're telling you about their day or what so it also gives them this space to sort of breathe into the relationship piece of connecting with others. And I feel like just the less formal environment,
Yes.
the students are just more willing to have these more natural conversations. They're not stuck in their heads with all of the little questions and stuff that they want to popcorn around on, in clinics. So
Yes.
yeah.
And
Hmm.
then I feel like actually really, I would be like, I want to kind of be like a fly on the wall in one of those conversations and
Yeah.
hear like how I'm sure in one of these conversations they're also trying to, you can't take off the physical therapy hat.
Yeah.
Just like that. Like I want to hear like how are they translating into a lot more like layman's terms, things that they're
Mhm.
actually hearing, right? And
Mhm.
reading from the books and all these studies. So I think that would actually be very interesting. So
Mhm.
how are you? I'm going to wind down my questions. Okay,
Mhm.
but this is, again, like you said, we could go on forever. But like how do you envision um the community like at this point? Like say like 3 5 years from now,
Mhm.
like how do you envision the whole, I don't even want to, it's not a project, but really it's a community, how, where is the growth, like where do
Mhm.
you think, how could this be really an integral part of the community such that, and I actually really love, I just have to say that this is an interprofessional, I just want to reiterate, for those who I'm actually going to attach, and I can always email you a copy of the poster, but this is truly an interprofessional, an inter-community collaboration. And
Mhm.
how do you envision that within like to say the next 3 to 5 years?
Well, what's kind of happened between all of the partnerships that are occurring in the space, which it's multi-organizational. So it's my academic health institution and this sort of church is central, and then multiple other nonprofits. Um, One of the newest initiatives on the island is an additional transitional housing complex with a very progressive model of allowing people to stay for a full year, to have supports for job seeking, etc. And so in my mind, what I think many of us are hoping is that there's some fluidity between the clinic space and the church space that we're in now,
Mhm.
and then continuing to partner and supporting the wellness initiatives that are going on in the transitional housing as people, hopefully move out and become housed. And as we know, then once people are housed, they don't, their health needs dramatically decline because housing is so critical. So I feel like the other big piece that I is important to me and important to our students to see is that we're changing, that we're not just in there providing care in this sort of distal end of this problem, right? We are part of changing the way that we support these different populations and help them move through some of the barriers to becoming housed and then to having and maintaining a job because they now know how to take care of their back and their feet and all of those sorts of things. So really, as we starting to shift more into that more preventative model and then helping people remain housed. And so thinking as PTs where we plug into that, I think that's kind of what our community is looking at holistically.
Thank you for that. Last one. Is there any, like words that you want to impart, like any advices for any of our viewers who may actually want to do a similar undertaking in their own communities?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just about connecting with the the right people, and people that have a shared interest and passion, and obviously having the the community you're wanting to serve, having their voice at the table and first, and not, as we know, not speaking on people's behalves or making assumptions about what types of services people need, but really, and I would never have thought we would be doing this much. I really thought we would be adjusting walkers and canes and giving
Mhm.
out shoes for, like
Yes,
that was kind of where we were gonna, and then always referring to this outpatient clinic. And so, yeah, I just think it's sort of like organically when you have people with shared interest in a population that is integrated
mhm.
into the initiative, and it is at the head of the table. I think anything's possible.
Definitely, definitely. So thank you so much, Laurie, and I look forward to continuing this conversation, with the broader audience during our town hall meeting on September 19. And, I look forward to hearing more from the mobility clinic in the future. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.